Imagine this, a kingdom teetering on the edge of total collapse, and a prophet is sent with one last high-stakes message, not to some back alley, but directly to the king himself. This isn't a quiet warning, it's a public showdown right at the center of power. We're going to dive deep into this incredibly dramatic moment from Jeremiah chapter 22 and see what happens when a throne is put on trial.
So right away, the stage is set with this very direct command. The Lord doesn't send Jeremiah to a temple or some quiet corner. No, he sends him straight into the lion's den, the royal palace. You can almost feel the tension building. This is going to be a public confrontation. And the message? Well, it's not up for negotiation.
And to really get the stakes here, you have to look at the timeline. We are in the final, chaotic couple of decades of the Kingdom of Judah. Kings are being propped up and knocked down, first by Egypt, then by Babylon. A whole group of their best and brightest have already been hauled off into exile. The air is just thick with fear and instability. This is, literally, the breaking point.
So what was this message? Well, it wasn't just some gentle advice. As you're about to see, this was a public summons. It was a demand for the highest power in the land to answer to an authority that was even higher.
Now, this is really interesting. The command to go down to the palace. It wasn't just about directions. Sure, the palace was physically at a lower elevation than the Temple Mount, but the phrase itself is this subtle, powerful statement. It's like saying, hey, royal power, you need to come down a level and submit to divine authority.
And get this, the message had a huge audience. It wasn't whispered in the king's ear. It was for his entire court, all his officials, and even the regular folks who were just coming and going through the palace gates. The text makes it crystal clear. Everyone is on the hook, and accountability starts at the very top.
Okay, so what was the king actually being told to do? This next part really gets to the ethical heart of the whole thing, the standard of justice. The command was to execute judgment and righteousness, or in the original Hebrew, mishpat and tzedakah. And listen, these aren't just vague, feel-good ideas. Mishpat is about concrete actions, about legal fairness, and tzedakah is about righteousness, about living in a right relationship with others in the community according to God's ways. You put them together, that's the bedrock of a truly just society.
And Jeremiah gets incredibly specific. This isn't some high-minded philosophy, it's a practical checklist. Rescue the person who's been robbed, protect the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow, the most vulnerable people in any society. And stop the corruption, stop shedding innocent blood. Justice had to be something you could see and feel.
So here's the bottom line. The king could go through all the religious motions, all the temple ceremonies, but if his kingdom wasn't practicing real, tangible justice for the vulnerable, it was all worthless. In fact, it was worse than worthless. It was a direct violation of their entire covenant with God.
Okay, so all of this builds to this massive pivotal moment. Jeremiah basically lays out an ultimatum for the king and his whole kingdom. He says, you're standing at a fork in the road. There are two paths for this throne, and the consequences, well, they couldn't be more different.
The first path is the path of obedience. If the king actually turns things around and establishes justice, the promise is just incredible. The dynasty of David will continue, kings will ride through the palace gates in chariots and on horses, a clear sign of stability, prosperity, and power. It's a future of total security and blessing.
But then there's the second path, and it is absolutely terrifying. If they ignore this warning, God makes the strongest oath possible. He swears by his own name that this royal house, the very symbol of their nation, will become a desolation, a total ruin. The contrast is just night and day.
And this right here, this illustrates a core theme you see all over the place. That amazing promise God made to King David centuries before, it wasn't a blank check. It wasn't some kind of unconditional immunity. The survival of the throne was always tied to their faithfulness to the covenant. God's promises are never a get-out-of-jail-free card, detached from how we live.
And yeah, tragically, we know exactly which path the king chose. This next part details the grim prophecy of what was going to happen as a result. A prophecy that, as we'll see, came true with devastating precision.
First, to really understand the destruction, you have to appreciate the glory. The prophecy compares the king's house to Lebanon, which was famous for its incredible, magnificent cedar forests. The original palace was built with these legendary cedars. It was a symbol of beauty, strength, and national wealth.
And then comes this shocking reversal. This glorious palace, this symbol of national pride, is going to become a wilderness.
an uninhabited wasteland. The prophecy is predicting its complete and total desolation.
Jeremiah even lays out the whole anatomy of this destruction. Step 1, the divine verdict is given. Step 2, God prepares destroyers, which shows that the Babylonian army wasn't just some random force, they were acting as instruments of judgment. And finally, step 3, they will literally cut down the palace's choice cedars, which is this powerful symbol of the complete dismantling of the entire royal system.
And this isn't just a symbolic story. It happened. In 586 BC, Nebuchadnezzar's army stormed Jerusalem. They burned the palace to the ground and completely dismantled the monarchy, just as Jeremiah had warned. The prophecy became a brutal, historical fact.
So in the aftermath, with the city in ruins, there's this one huge question hanging in the air. Why? Why did all of this happen? The final part of this prophecy gives the definitive answer.
The text is amazing here because it actually predicts this exact moment. It paints this picture of travelers from all over the world passing by the ruins of Jerusalem, turning to each other and asking, how could a city this great fall so completely? Why would its God let this happen?
And the answer is just as blunt and direct as the warning was at the beginning. It's no big mystery. It happened for one clear reason. They abandoned the covenant. They turned their backs on their God and started worshiping other gods. The verdict is completely unambiguous.
And this is really the ultimate takeaway. The fall of Jerusalem wasn't fundamentally about a superior Babylonian army or a bad political strategy. According to the text, the root cause of the whole disaster was a moral and spiritual collapse. They had abandoned the very foundation of justice and faithfulness that was supposed to make them who they were.
And that leaves us with this really challenging thought, one that echoes way beyond ancient Judah. What happens when power, in any time, refuses to be held accountable to justice for the most vulnerable? Is some kind of collapse, whether it's moral, social, or political, is that always the inevitable result? It's a question from the distant past that feels incredibly relevant today.